Good afternoon. My name's Elizabeth McWilliams. I'm the Alumni and Events Officer here at Churchill and an alumna of the college. Unfortunately, Tom Bowden, our Head of Estates, was unable to join us to facilitate today, so I'm happy to be here to introduce John Moore, our Head of Grounds and Gardens. We're going to watch a film where John will take us on a tour of the college grounds. He'll look at some of the sustainability challenges for the team, some current projects, and a bit of a look ahead to the future here at the college. After the film, John will be taking questions live. So as you're watching, if anything comes to you, do please pop a question in the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll see how many we can get through afterwards. Enjoy the film.
Hello, I'm John Moore, Head of Grounds and Gardens at Churchill College. I'd like to welcome you to a tour around the college grounds and gardens, looking at what we're doing, how we're doing things nice and environmentally friendly, and how we're trying to improve our environment as we go. At the moment, we're standing on top of the Muller Institute's tower, as it gives you a view of the site and gives you a real feel for the scale of the college. So as we look around, we are covering nearly 50 acres on this site when we include our Storey's Way properties that back directly onto the grounds. So at the top end up here, we have our rugby pitch. And as you look around, it goes down to our football, and you'll see various trees all the way around. So we're completely tree covered as you go around, covering Maddenley Road that's over there. You'll see there's the long grass where we grow the meadow plants and have the meadows. And as you go around again, you'll just see different areas of interest. It takes us onto our cricket field, where again, we're getting ready for a game of cricket today. And again, you see more of the trees that are going down around the perimeter. Then it goes down further into the college where the main buildings are. And in there, you can see lots of trees popping out through the roofs of the courtyard. So in the courtyard, you'll see the trees are there. So on this site, we're really lucky because we're managing to incorporate all aspects of horticulture and groundsmanship. So behind us here, we can see all our amazing sports fields that are maintained to an immaculate standard. And as we come down into the college, we come across a very large herbaceous border, which gives us complete flower throughout the summer. This flowers through from sort of April, May, when it starts with some of the agapanthus and various things that we've got here, through the alliums, and it goes through to the all the salvias as we got back here. But it basically just flowers right through to the first frosts, and it just gives such an amazing impact for people to look at. So people really enjoy this area of the college as they're walking around and into it. So we're now walking into the Master's Garden, which is quite a formal garden. We have several ponds in this garden, one here and one on the other side of the building here. Again, it's really important that we get ducks and things like this coming here. We also have hedgehogs that we've had in this garden. The sides of this pond are completely straight up, so there's no way they can get out. So we make sure we have a plank of wood, and you'll see the hedgehogs or the ducks walking up and down the plank to get out if they fall in or if they're going for a swim. As we walk into the garden, we have various borders in here. We have the Sir Winston Churchill border here, which is our national collection of plants named after Sir Winston Churchill, which we have through Plant Heritage. And then over here we have the more sort of formal borders or mixed border, showing lots of flowers and colour as you look down into the garden. But even in a formal garden like here with the nice lawns, we still have a fantastic tree in the middle, but underneath it we have long grass. And the idea is that even in a formal garden like this, you can have a haven for wildlife. So we'll have all sorts of different things living in here. Again, the lawns, you'll see them. People won't thank me for pointing it out, but you will see that there are weeds in this lawn. We haven't sprayed these for many, many years, and we just mow them and scarify them, just general maintenance. But we try and avoid to use any chemical on these lawns. We're now standing in the back gardens of the Storey's Way properties, and at the moment we're in the Xiao Shampoo garden, which was created a few years ago after a very generous donation from an alumni called Xiao Shampoo. So this garden has been flowering beautifully, but we've tried to do with these gardens is we took all the fences. They basically used to have fences between each garden. So whereas it was 0.6 of an acre over there, 0.6 of an acre here, then another 0.6, and then another 0.6. We've opened up the entire site. This allows the wildlife to freely move around between the areas so that we're not enclosing them. We don't want to have physical barriers for them to be able to walk through. So as we transition from these gardens here, which are full of flower, formal lawns, which are nicely mown into stripes, we move across into this area here, which is our orchard. In here, the houses that are around this area were built in the sort of 1930s area. So all of these trees are that sort of age of planting. So they are quite old. We never spray for any insects on these, so we've never treated them for anything like woolly aphid that things get. We prune them once a year. We get fantastic crops of apples, pears, plums. We have green gages. We have a mulberry tree over there. We have a whole gambit of the fruit trees. And all of this is available for the students and staff to pick. Underneath it, we leave the grass long. We have just recently cut it. So we grow this as a bit of a meadow area. In the spring, we have all the different bulbs that come up here through the crocuses and various other daffodils and things. It then has some wildflowers that come in. We cut little pathways to walk through them. And then about nowish, we take the first hay crop off it, and then we will just cut it to a long length. We won't try and cut it formally, and it'll just allow it to keep the grass down and the wildflowers that are in here to naturally grow underneath. We then transition again through, which is part of it. These are the student vegetable gardens. So the students get given an area where they can grow their own fruit and veg. They grow what they like, and they obviously harvest it, maintain it, weed it, pick it and harvest it. This is something that's been really popular. We've been doing this for quite a number of years now. This year we extended the number of raised beds they've got. So they had more and more people that are starting to sign up to it. And in the background, we have their greenhouse, which they can grow all their various things. And you can see in here, they're growing tomatoes mainly, and they're starting to do really well. So this is, again, something that's really nice for the students, that they can come in here, pick the fruit, grow their own vegetables, and just generally interact with nature in this area as and when they like. So again, as we move through from the vegetable and orchard area, we come through into the next garden. In here, we have our beehives. So over there, as you can see, the bees are happily, busily going backwards and forwards, picking up their honey. We've got essentially 3-4 hives and a couple of nukes that we're going as we're trying to breed some new queens that are a bit friendlier than one of our other hives. In this garden as well, you can see is rather overgrown. There's more fruit trees in here. But what we're doing is we're letting it grow this year to see what comes up in the wildflowers and what we actually have, because we want to turn this whole area into a wildlife garden. So we want to have a small pond in here and lots of wildflowers. So again, the bees have somewhere to forage, somewhere to go and get their water. But again, it'll just be another nice wildflower area with lots of native plants in here. And we'll just cut some small sort of walkway paths through the grass so people can just walk through it and sit and chill in here and enjoy the wildflowers and listening to the insects and wildlife chirping around the place. So we're here today to do our weekly inspections of our beehives. Nikki is about to give a little bit of smoke to the front of the hive just to let them know that we're coming in and to hopefully calm them down a bit. So our next job is to start dismantling the hive so we can get down to the brood box, which is where the queen lives and she's laying her eggs. So that's what we're going to do next. As you can see, they're quite hard to split these, and what it is the bees propolis up the hives. So we have to use our hive tool to crack this off ready so that we can then lift off the top. So we're now lifting off the area where the stores are so we can get down to where the queen is, and we'll be leaving our queen excluder on top, because that way if she's on there she can't get out and escape. So now we can take off the queen excluder, which again is propolis on. So we now just put the queen excluder down near the front so they can fly back in as and when they want. Gotcha. We just lifted out the first one of the first frame out here. We're looking for the queen to see if she's on there. She shouldn't be. She should be where the brood is, which is where all her eggs are. And the end one should be just mainly stores. So she's not on here. We can see lots of bees with pollen on them. And we'll just put this then onto our hanger at the back to store it, whilst we then work our way down through the system. So in this frame here, as we get further into the center of the hive, we can see that there's the capped brood in here, and next to it we've got little larvae in there, which is the sort of early stages, and next to that there will be little eggs. So the larvae look like little maggots that are curled up like little seeds, nice and white, and the eggs look like little grains of rice. So we'll put this one back in and we'll carry on looking down the hive. So we're now lifted out the last one in the last frame in the brood box, and this one is all caps. It's really quite heavy to lift, and as you can see on here that it's all capped. So underneath this, you would scrape this when you want to harvest the honey. You would scrape off the top of this, and then you'll be able to extract the honey from it. So obviously the bees are getting quite flighty now. We haven't seen the queen this time. We don't always see her on our inspections because she can move around quite quickly and she tends to stay in the darker areas. So that is the inspection of the bottom one. We've seen good capped brood, we've seen little larvae, and we've had eggs. So we know that the queen's in there, we know she's laying, and we know that this is a healthy hive at the moment. So we'll now rebuild it back up to look in the top box. So as we're putting these frames back on, we have to make sure that all of the frames inside are running the same way. So we don't have one facing one way and one facing the other. Make sure we've got a tight seal on the top and it's back together. We'll then have a quick look in this top box where it should be full of stores, hopefully. So here is the top where you can really see the honey in here. So at the top, you can see that they've capped it, and lowered and round it, you can see it's still very wet where it's being converted. So this is going to be quite a nice crop of honey on this bit, as you can see, and they're still building it out here. It's much more capped. As an example, this is what it goes in as to start with, as a plain frame. So we put this in with foundation on it. They then pull out the areas and make the cones and then fill it with honey. So you can see how this is completely flat when it goes in, and then how they convert it to what they need. There we go. We've moved further across the gardens in Storey's Way, and we're now standing in what is the college's vegetable garden. This area has been maintained and grown by the catering department, as they want to actually get really involved in the growing of the produce, and then be able to see how it's grown and then produced, and then actually take it up to the kitchens to use. Obviously, we can never manage to produce enough to feed the entire college, but what we can do is have dinners, special dinners and occasions where we can use the produce from the gardens. So in here we've got things like Swiss chard that's grown really nicely. We've had some great beetroots. We've got some small potatoes over there, crops, and again courgettes. So the idea is that although we're not going to feed the entire college, but we are reducing our food mileage by growing some of the food here, and it's really helping everyone connect with what they eat. So we want people to see what there's grown, how it looks, and then take it to the table. So again, this is another thing that we're really keen to expand. So we will hopefully over the years get slightly bigger than this, but unfortunately we do not have the space to feed the entire college. So we now have been moving into having green roofs around the site. So we're experimenting with different types and different depths. So on here at the moment, we're looking at a bike shed. So this year we put on a sedum roof. This is great because again, it adds more biodiversity up here. You get the flowers and things for the bees and the wildlife. It also helps with water runoff and management. So we're looking at various flat roofs around the site to start moving out further to have more flat green roofs around the site. So this is Michael Westmore, the college's head gardener, and he's using our hot water machine today to do the weed killing. This is a part of our drive to stop using chemicals, which we have stopped using on site now for about 2 to 3 years. So here he goes with his hot water machine. So since I started at Churchill College, we've not used a lot of chemicals or total weed killers. We've been trying to reduce their use and reliance year on year. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we decided that we would go total weed killer free on the site. Part of the process of doing this is that we decided we would look around for alternative methods of weed control. And one of the ones that we chose was this one here, which is a hot water machine. It uses no chemicals, it just has hot water. So it heats up to 98 degrees. And this works by expanding the cells in the plants so they explode, and it then actually just kills the plant. So it goes to a very sort of from a nice lush green plant there, and you'll see it starting to go to a darker color, and then eventually it will just collapse and die. If it's a perennial, people say, will it kill it? It takes 2 or 3 applications to do it. It will come back. But as you can see here, the effectiveness. The good thing about this is not only we're only using hot water on the site, so we don't have to worry about runoff or anything like this. There's no protective clothing that's needed to do this job, except for a pair of thick gloves to protect you from any of the hot water when touching a pipe. So here he goes up the path, and you can see broadleaf weeds are just slowly collapsing under the temperature. So as part of our environmental policy of trying to reduce our carbon emissions, over the last few years, we've been using electric or battery operated hedge cutters, trimmers and leaf blowers. And now just out is the first battery mower with a roller. So here we have a hater mower with a battery and a rear roller. In this compartment is where the huge battery is, which just slides out and then drops back in. They're fantastic machines, and Michael here is about to start it up so you can just see how it works. One of the things that's really good about this is the noise levels. They're really quite quiet, and you can hear me talking over it. So we have lower noise with these, we have less vibration, and it's just such a much nicer machine to use with no fumes or a lot less pollution. So around the site, we've been putting up bird boxes and various other habitat areas for the wildlife to live in. So just back here, we have a bird box on the building. In here, we always either get blue tits or great tits. We've also got lots of bird boxes in various trees around the site. And this is something that we're aiming to continue this year, along with other habitat areas and homes, like things like hedgehog boxes that we're intending to be putting around the site. So here we have a silver birch that was planted in about October 2020. At the bottom of it, you'll see a green object. This is called a hydration bag. So how it works is it has a gap at the top here, and this holds 70 litres of water. And the idea is that we fill it up once a week, giving it an absolute amount of water that we know is a guaranteed amount. And underneath it, it has tiny little pinprick holes. And it takes between 3 and 4 hours for it to drain out onto the tree. Because of the nature of it draining so slowly, we don't get any water loss. Whereas if you watered this directly with a hose or a watering can, the water would spread around everywhere and go everywhere. So you would waste quite a bit. This gives a very directed, slow, deep penetrating water for the tree. We found this to be very successful around the site for when we have it. It also helps us, of course, identify which trees we've planted recently, so the person that's going around watering doesn't miss any. But these are just an absolute really useful tool for watering and saving water. We're at the start now of our perimeter path that we built in 2020. This path was built for the purpose of allowing students and people to access the full site. So we have such a vast area that most people just don't go to. We have the sports fields, which are well used, but we have areas which are really nice and normally tranquil without the traffic going past. People just didn't appreciate. And one of the things that we found from creating this perimeter path was it allowed us to hang a huge number of different environmental areas and things off it. So one of the things we really wanted to do was create wildflower areas along it. We had for many years just left the grass long in these areas, but we wanted to actually start increasing what we were doing and the biodiversity of the areas by planting plug plants. So we had different options of how we achieved this method, and we tried 2 different areas. So behind, just to the side of me here, this area, we actually raised up the ground a bit from some surplus soil from the path. So we wanted to give it a little bit more of a mound to give a bit more protection to the residents in Cowan Court for the views in. And on this area here, we sowed a wildflower mix, which was an 80-20. So it's 80% wild grasses and 20% wildflowers. So this will take a number of years to actually really get going. There's a few annuals that have come up, the poppies, the chamomile and things like this, but the perennials will come through. It was a perennial mix, and we'll see those coming through and starting to take over. But this will take slightly longer to get going, but it's going to be a nice entrance to the area. As we then start to walk along the path, what we decided to do with the main area, particularly where we had long grass for many, many years. I mean, this has been left long for as long as I've been here. So for 25 years, this area has had no weed killer, no fertilizer, anything like that. It's just been left to grow long. And then about sort of July, August time, it's been cut down and almost treated as a meadow, but without the sort of wildflowers in it. So we decided that this was an ideal area to start our wildflower mix putting in. So on this, we decided we would go for plug planting. So we basically bought just over 8,000 plug plants, covering probably about 15 to 20 different species of different plants in here. We chose them for different areas. So in this bit here, it's a very, very wet area. So we chose ones that would be happy in heavy clay and sort of very wet conditions. In this area, what we did is we cut the grass down really short in the spring, which when we were planting them in this sort of April time. We then marked out swathes through here of either 1 meter wide or 2 meters wide, and we then marked them out in different lengths. And they could have been 10 meters up to 30 meters in length. We were then, once we'd done that, we could scarify the areas, so we could really scarify it hard to make sure that the soil was there, fully exposed. We used no weed killers to do anything like that. And then we were really lucky because our student population, we offered them the option to come out and join us and do some planting of these. And we had a huge take up. And this was really nice because obviously it was a COVID year. And because we had them all into sections of swathes, it meant we could number each one and we could then designate areas to students. So we gave them all their individual trowels and gloves. We made up little selection boxes of plants, and we explained to them we were doing 5 per meter and that they could just randomly plant them through their swathes, which they did. And this year we've seen a number come up. We've had quite a few things flowering. We've had oxeye daisies. We've had some knotweed. We've had the red campion, the white campion, and various others, and ragged robin. And particular success this year has been the yellow rattle. And the yellow rattle is very important to this sort of area because with that, it actually suppresses the grass. It's a parasite and it parasitizes the roots of the grass and it slows it down. So that's a really important thing. At the moment, it's rattling nicely with the seed in there. So we're going to be spreading it because it is an annual and it will hopefully start spreading and we'll see things slowing down. But as I say, we were confident in this area because it had been left so long for so long that the grass isn't a thick sward. So we thought that they would cope with it and they would actually be able to grow and survive. And they have done that really well. I've stopped at this point here because one of the things that's been quite amazing over here is we never used to walk over here during this time of year because there wasn't really the great need or want to walk over here. And what's happened is since we've done this, we've seen various orchids come up. So we knew we had them over here of the bee orchids, but we've had about 15 or 20 of those that we found. And this year, for the first time, I've never seen on the site before, we've had 10 pyramidal orchids come up, and they're still flowering in there at the back. So we've got various clumps along this area, which has been an amazing thing to come up. They've obviously probably, or more than likely, flowered here every year as long as I've been here. But because I've not been over here at the right time, we haven't seen it. We've also been seeing the vetch that we planted coming up. And then here's the yellow rattle, which is just coming up, and it's just really taken over this whole area, which is great. And it has a little rattle, as you can hear there, which is why it's named. So that's going to full of seed. That's virtually ripe. In another few weeks or so, we'll be cutting this down. We'll then let it dry out so the seeds can drop, and then we'll rake it over, and then we'll just have to keep it cut to a not short, but a reasonable height. So that will then just see it through. One of the great things, again, with the fact that we had such a fantastic uptake from the students, was the fact that we're intending to plant loads of bulbs this year. So we're going to probably plant a minimum of 10,000, probably many more, of native bulbs. So we're going to be planting in this area because where we just come past, we've just passed the taxodiums, which is the swamp cypress. I know they're not natives, but we're trying to have a diverse collection of trees. But in there, they really like it wet. And that actually sits physically wet and underwater for most of the winter. So we'll be putting in things like the Fritillaria milagris, which is the snake's head fritillaria, which likes a sort of water meadow feel to it. So that will do really well in there. And then along the sides, we'll be able to plant things like the native daffodil. We'll put in the native bluebells, and we'll have things like the snowdrops. So this is going to make it a really interesting area, because you're going to walk along this at any time, this path, and you'll come here in the spring, you'll see the bulbs, they'll be all flowering, you'll be impressed with these. Once they go over, you'll start to see some of the newer things like the primroses and cowslips that we planted along the edges. So we planted these along the edges where the grass doesn't outgrow them, we don't lose them into the area, and you'll start to see them coming up. Once they start going over, we'll then start to see things like the oxeye daisy coming up and all the other plants that we've put in. Again, once we get to this point, we've planted no end of trees in here. So we planted last year 107 trees, and along this path we planted probably 70 trees, and a part of those we planted over 50 malus trees, which are crab apples, and we planted over 10 different varieties. So with these, in the spring, they gave us a fantastic show of flower, which was really nice to see. We'll then get the fantastic berries and fruit in the autumn, and we'll get autumn color. So this is just going to continually add to what we're getting. We have already got a lot of maturish trees around us, like the beech and things like this here. With this area, we're allowing, one of the important things for biodiversity is that we don't over prune them and dead wood them. So if it's a safe area, we will always leave dead wood in here, because we all know that there's lots of insects out there that like dead wood to live in. But actually the most important is dry dead wood, which is what you get in trees, because most people are too worried about it falling. So if it's safe, we will always leave it in. Equally, there's a tree back up here, which is a big white willow, and you can see in there, there's no end of woodpecker holes. Again, the tree is safe, we check it and we monitor it, but again, we leave the woodpecker holes in there. It's another area for biodiversity and for the animals to live in. But we're encouraging the fact that we want to have wood, dead wood in trees for the animals and insects. We're also allowing dead wood on the ground. We're creating log piles about the place. Again, this then goes into the fact that when we get things like our hedge, we're going to create hedgehog boxes, but having the log piles is a natural area for them. And again, in this area, one of the things, because at the moment we're applying to become a hedgehog friendly campus status. So we're aiming for our bronze award this year. So we'll be putting our application in December. And some of the things that they say that you really need to make sure you're encouraged to have on the sites are things like wildflowers, because it brings in the animals, the small insects, and various things that the hedgehogs will eat. Also, they like the fact that we have things like beech trees, which we've got plenty of here, because they have a small leaf, And the small leaf is really important for hedgehogs. They don't want huge leaves like they have on the plane tree here. They want the small ones to make their little hibernation areas and their little day beds, and which they'll stay in. So they'll be happily living in this area of long grass. They'll create little areas to sleep and they'll stay overnight. Or again, for hibernations, they'll go into our log piles and things like this. Again, as we've walked along this whole area, this hedge along our boundary is field maple, which is native again. So we have a huge native hedge, which allows for various birds to nest in. And we try not to cut it too frequently to keep it as a tight hedge though. We want it to, fill out, again, allowing the insects and various wildlife. As I alluded to, we were very interested in the trees on this site. And one of the things we were doing when we were surveying a number of years ago, we realized because we had a policy of every time we took a tree out, that we would try and plant 3, not necessarily in the same spot, but we tried to do 3 every time we had to remove a tree because it died, it was dangerous, or something was wrong with it, we'd plant 3. So we were increasing steadily across the site. And this actually gives us the age diversity, which is really important because this is a new college, 60 years old, and no ender trees were planted when it was first built. And of course, that can cause you a problem that suddenly you can have a lot of trees coming towards the end of their life all at once, which is not something you want. So you need to be planting regularly throughout your time. And again, we'll plant different sizes and different types of trees. Again, that's the other thing that we're wanting to do is have a huge diversity of trees because we have got climate change and things like this coming now. So something that was classed as really coping well and doing well here can suddenly struggle. So with things like beech, they're a very shallow rooting tree. They could become a problem in later life when we have water shortages. Equally, we've got things like ash dieback we've had again, so we could end up losing a lot of our ash trees. We've seen that with Dutch elm disease. So we don't want to suddenly say we're going to plant all natives because they may not survive so well. Things in the past that used to say were hardy in these, were tender in these areas. Now people are saying actually they're quite hardy and they'll survive, particularly where we are in this part of the country. So we're seeing the temperatures and things changing and things surviving that you never would have risked planting before. So going back to our tree numbers, as we found that we were going up, about 2 or 3 years ago, we actually thought we're getting a large number on site. We should set ourselves a goal of planting 1,000 trees by about another 2 years. So last year we put in 107 trees, and that took us to a total of 930 on the site. So this year we need to plant another 70 trees, which will take us to our 1,000 tree target. This is not just a set goal to get to 1,000 and stop. What we're hoping to do is keep going and say until we've run out of room, we'll keep planting as many as we can. We've been very lucky because a part of this, we went out to our alumni and we said to them, we're planting all these trees. Would you like to support us and help us? And we actually managed to, within a couple of weeks of asking the alumni, they donated money to us and we hit our target to pay for all the trees within about 2 weeks. So that covered the cost for the college. As I say, we're not just stopping at these things. Last year we planted, basically we did a 1.3 acres we covered of wildflowers. Our target again is about 5 acres on this site. So again, we've set a target, but we will go past it if we can, but we're wanting to get to that area. So behind us here, we have the football pitch, which is a bit further up. Again, this is an area, we cut the grass, we keep it short, but actually it's, we leave it a little, it's just been cut actually today by the looks of it because of the stripes, but we tend to keep this a little bit longer, but actually it's not doing a lot for us for wildlife. It's a little bit, we've got weeds in the back. I mean, on the sports fields, what we tend to find is that we've done for the last few years now is you have to keep them to a certain standard. So as I say, we don't use total weed killers on the site, haven't done for a number of years now, but on the sports fields, we have to keep them to a set standard for sport. So on there, we're trying it out. We've done it every 2 years for a number of years now that we spray. So every 2 years, we'll get just the sports pitches, not the surrounds, and we'll spray them, have a company spray them. We're going to try and extend that year every so often. So next year we're going to go to 3 years just to see how it works, because we don't want to be having to spray if we can avoid it, but equally we can't afford the pitches to standards to fall. So in this area here, we'll be extending this up here. So we'll be extending the wildflower mix onto here. We'll be planting trees on it as well to add to the thickness of our boundary and our tree belt towards Maddenley Road. But one of the things we'll find on this is that when we planted the wildflowers on the other side, where we planted them in the areas just here, we found that the sward was quite thin because it hadn't been cut. It was under trees and the wildflowers did well. The other side of the path we'd cut in the past and the sward became thicker. And what we found is that the grass didn't grow as well there for length and the wildflowers have struggled more. So on this side, what we will do is we will mark out the areas that we want to plant the wildflowers like we did on the other side, but we'll just scratch the top off with a mini digger. We'll take the turf off and we will plant in there. And then we'll also sow some native grasses as well within it. We won't scratch the whole lot off. We'll just do where we're planting. And this will allow them to get hold and get growing before the other grasses come back in again. And we'll start to see the system take over. So this whole area will then become a much wider area of wildflowers, which again, will just add to the biodiversity that we're creating. As I say, going back to the hedgehogs, we're intending around our compost areas to have huge log piles there. At the back, we can allow some of the brambles to grow because again, that's the sort of thing they live in because it gives them protection. They can get in there and other animals that may want to attack them won't go in after them. So they feel at home and they feel secure and they just enjoy life in there. So with our compost bins area here, we were really keen to hide them because they're not the most attractive of items. So we had the possibility of getting a lot of soil. We had Cowan Court being built at this point, as well as the Muller Institute was having its extension. So we had thousands of tons of soil to get rid of. And again, we didn't want it to be going off site because that creates huge amounts of road miles and haulage. So we actually had it all brought over here. And this area being flat at one point, we managed to create huge mounds all the way around it. So as you look at from anywhere in the college across the site, you can't actually see these compost bins. They're completely hidden. This is a huge area that we have that we basically compost all of our weeds and grass. We make sure that every bit of rubbish that we create, whether it be prunings from trees or hedges, if it's something like that, we'll then shred it. So it'll go into this area. We'll have all the wood chips. Again, this then can be put on the borders as a mulch, or it can go around the trees, which helps us maintain moisture. Also adds a little bit more fertilizer and feed to the ground. Also has an attractive look to it. As we work our way down, we're into different years of compost. So it tends to last in here for it takes about a year for it to rot down totally. This autumn, we'll be using these two here, which are quite enormous bays. Each of these are probably about 16 foot squared, roughly. I think they're about 8 feet at each sleeper, and about best part of nearly 6 foot high. So you can see how huge they are. The end bay was the one that we had last year. We didn't get to use it all, but you could just see the fantastic compost we create, which again, we're managing to put onto our gardens to feed the borders, add the organic matter into it, and just keep recycling the whole system. And again, it helps us maintain the water in the ground. But these are just absolutely fantastic. The one thing we are finding, although these look huge, that we are struggling with them a bit, being a bit on the small side for us. So we are this year looking at extending them to make them a little bit bigger and come out one more sleeper. So as we continue along the path, and it's an amazing thing, there's nearly 700 meters as we go along. We come to different areas. So we're going through underneath these trees and between them. And as you can see along this area, what we've done is we've mowed small strips either side. So it makes it feel a bit more formal, but also stops the plants all flopping onto the path, because this path is only 1.5 meters and we don't want people getting wet legs as they're trying to get along it. But also the fact that we leave this to go long here and readiness for next year, we can see what comes up. So we'll see if we're going to have things like orchids pop up. We can see if there are already wildflowers in this area. And we can, again, we can see how it's going to react, and if we're going to have to take off the tops level of grass and things, or if, like here, it looks exactly like we'll be able to plant directly straight into the grounds with the plugs. So again, this is going to be another area that we can plant up as we're going around. So you'll feel as you're going down this whole path, it's a tree sort of laden area. So it's basically a complete pathway with trees following around. You'll be submerged and immersed rather in wildflowers. And again, back at the football pitch where we just looked at, we will probably look to create and cut small walkway sort of rides through it so that you can actually get up close and personal with the wildflowers, because we don't want people just to be able to look from a distance, and equally we don't want people trampling through them all. So we're going to give people that access by just cutting little grass paths. So as we come towards the very end of the path and we're up near the chapel, you can see to our right here how we have trees still in the very short grass where we keep it mowed, but actually we're letting long grass grow underneath there. So again, it's another wildlife haven. So as the wildlife and insects or whatever it is, or small animals, they scurry across this short grass, they can get in there for a bit of cover and a bit of shelter. So this is something that's, again, really important, that we've got short grass, but actually we've still got long grass within it. We're going to come along this bit here and we're going to drop down into the sort of copse area where we can see where we've been doing some more tree planting, and also there's already a lot of bulbs that have been planted in the past. So in the area that's been over the years affectionately known as the sort of copse area, which is just a sunken area where we've had various trees, we've tried to rename it now to our small arboretum. And what we've done over the last few years is we've been planting trees in here, and we've done it into zones. We've got in here, we've got all the cornices, which have the fantastic bracts for flowers. So we've got different types of them here. Once you go through there, we actually have a golden rain tree here, the Colrutia, which is just flowering at the top. And then we go into the sort of acer section. So the acers like the fact that it's got dappled shade in here, which is just really nice for them, and it just adds that bit of extra. They go a bit further down this way and then through to the magnolias. One of the things you'll notice is that we have a bark path in here. And the reason we put this in is partly because many years ago, there was about 20,000 daffodils were planted in here, which makes a fantastic show in the spring. And before there's absolute thousands and thousands of snowdrops. But people, again, couldn't really get in and enjoy them. So you'd see people walking around the outside of the bank or trying to tiptoe their way through them all. And we wanted to make it accessible. So we put in this park path that went round it so people could get inside, people could get in there, take the photographs, and just actually enjoy it. Again, we used to cut this down once the daffodils were finished, and we just used to keep it kept a bit lower. This year, we've let it grow and haven't cut it at all this year yet. And lo and behold, we had two pyramidal orchids pop up in here as well. So they're obviously quite happy on this site. And along here, a lot of people will say that this looks really scruffy in here, but actually it's fantastic habitat. So we've left it here. We've got the nettles, which are great for certain butterflies. We've got ivy again, which is fantastic ground cover for animals and creatures to creep in and under. You look up into the tree, there are small dead branches up here. They're of no danger to anybody, because if they do fall, they'll fall into an area that's not on the path and they're not going to actually injure anyone. So we're happy with that. It's quite stable and quite sturdy, that dead wood. So we'll leave it for the moment. We monitor it yearly and we keep an eye on it, but we'll make sure where we can, we'll keep it. So again, we've got the wildflowers through here. This year we'll have wildflowers planted in this area. So again, it'll add to the interest. So we'll have all those bulbs, and once we've got those through, it'll come into the wildflowers. Again, here we had a tree that showed a branch which wasn't happy. We took the branch down and we've just left it lying there, so it can just create a bit more of a habitat there. You know, it's not doing anybody any harm. You know, as gardeners, we can be far too tidy. And if you've got a site like this, we can afford to be scruffy in a few places and actually just dedicate it to the wildlife. Again, you've got ivy growing up trees, all these things that people would say we shouldn't do, and that we're in a college or in a university, we should be making sure everywhere is immaculate and tidy. But that's not totally what things are about always. It's about actually working with your environment and trying to enhance it. You know, and this is what we're aiming to do here. So where we can, we'll leave the dead wood, we'll leave dead branches lying around, we'll create log piles, we'll let the grass grow long, we'll allow certain weeds to grow within the grass. We won't go around spraying. And we're finding the benefits of it, because we're seeing much more insects, we're seeing more butterflies, we're seeing various things. You go along, we see grass snakes. It's just an absolute sort of wildlife haven. So this is something that we're really benefiting from. The one thing that we haven't done and we're about to do is actually have a proper wildlife survey, because we want to actually see what we've got and actually see what we're improving and actually see the tangible benefits for what we've done and what we're putting in. So I hope you've enjoyed your tour around the gardens and you've learned a few things that we're doing about the site. I'd just like to thank all the people that have been involved in the filming, the planting and all the other things that we do around the site and the support we get from our alumni and donors. Thank you very much.
Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the film. We've had absolutely loads of questions, so I'm going to get stuck straight in. John, how does smoke calm bees?
Well, bees are basically, it goes back to their sort of genetics to many years ago, that they would live in the woods and in the trees. They would assume that this was a forest fire coming, so a number of them would gorge on honey, ready to leave the hive and make a run for it. And so essentially they're doing this. Then obviously they're calmed down. Luckily for us as a beekeeper, the abdomen swells with the honey, so they can't get the sting around to get you. So that's essentially what it is. It's a genetics thing that they're getting ready to leave. When they realize it's not, they don't.
Great, great. Next question we've got, which is better, green roof or solar panels?
Well, for us, both really, because we have both of them. We're putting the green roofs up, and actually we're putting some solar panels on top of the green roofs, and up at the top where we have our machines, which are battery operated, we're charging those up via solar panels. So I think they've both got their places, both do different jobs.
Next up, how is your hot water weed killer heated, and are there domestic versions available?
This is actually, it's like a combination boiler in your house. So essentially it is unfortunately heated by a petrol engine, which is obviously not ideal, but it's better than having to use chemicals, we feel. So essentially it just heats it up as you're using it, and it's a direct heat from it. I think there are smaller versions, well, there are smaller versions of them, but they are obviously very expensive. So in the garden, if it's only a small area and you wanted to do your patio, every time you have a cup of coffee, got a little bit of water left in your kettle, run outside and pour that on the weeds, and that'll work just as well.
Oh, nice easy version. How many other colleges are doing this kind of work, looking at, I guess, more sustainable initiatives?
I think all the colleges are starting to move this way. I mean, and they're doing it in different levels and different degrees. And of course, we've all got different sized areas. So I think it's something that's becoming very important across the site, across the university. And I think we'll just see it developing more and more.
Hopefully. Do you have hot water leakage problems or drought problems with the flat roof gardens?
No, I mean, they're basically made up and they're designed to take very sort of arid conditions. So on one of our areas where we've got the sedum roof, they're designed to store water in the leaves, so they will take very, very dry conditions. And then the idea is that once the water, you get heavy rain and things like this, it will go into the growing media, and then it will slowly let the water out. So it's not a sort of like rush of water going everywhere and down into the system. So it holds a certain amount, it slows the runoff, and basically the plants are chosen for being drought tolerant and hardy.
Great. Going back to in the film, you talk about the meadows, the yellow rattle you use there, how does that increase biodiversity?
Basically, yellow rattle is a sort of parasite, so it parasitizes the grass roots, which this then slows the growth of the grass, which makes it shorter. This then allows the other plants and the wildflowers to actually grow and get in there and get up to flowering height. Without the yellow rattle, the grass will be too dominant and it would actually stop the wildflowers because they would be swamped out. They wouldn't get the light they needed and the space. So without the yellow rattle, it basically doesn't work as well.
We've got a question here. Doesn't retention of dead wood in the trees impede new growth? No,
I mean, it's very natural. I mean, it's only because we manage trees that we don't have them in there, because as I said in the video, we're sort of always worried about it falling onto people. I mean, trees have lived in woods and forests for however long they've been around. It doesn't stop them growing there. It's a natural process that branches die back. They then compartmentalize themselves so that disease and the decay doesn't go back down into it, and it naturally eventually falls. So it's actually just a natural process and doesn't impede at all.
Great. Are there any formal studies being done here at the college in terms of numbers of butterflies, moths, rodents? And if I can, I think I'd like to tie that up with a similar question that's come in saying, do we use trail cams to monitor wildlife activity across the site?
At the moment, we haven't. I mean, this is one thing that we're really keen to do, is actually find somebody to do a proper biodiversity study and look at actually what animals, wildlife, insects and various things that we have on site, because we'd like to actually have a benchmark. We've obviously started increasing all the biodiversity by putting all the plants in and the wildflowers, but actually having this thing to know, we assume we're doing the right thing, and we know that we're seeing a few more butterflies and things around. But actually to have someone come in and say, this is where we are now, and then in another 5 years after we've done more, then say where we are, or alternatively for the person to come in and say, well, actually this is an area that you're lacking in or missing, so you should actually concentrate on this area. And as for the trail cams, this is something we'll probably want to do with our hedgehog friendly status campus, because one of the things you're supposed to do for that is monitor the hedgehogs and movement to see how many you've got on site. So it's something we might look into later on.
Oh, I think the students would love that. Yeah. 2 questions from someone here. How is the planting funded? And is there a domino effect whereby other colleges are following Churchill's lead?
I mean, the college is very supportive of our grounds and gardens, so they do fund us really well, which is really nice. But also we get quite a lot of the alumni that will come in and fund it. So we did actually go out and ask if they wanted to donate towards our tree fund, where we're trying to get to 1,000, which they all did, and we've got quite a lot of money. We've had gardens donated to us as well from Xiao. So we do get this. Whether it'll be a domino effect to the other colleges, I don't know.
I'm sure they'll follow our lead.
but no, so we get basically lots of donations, and the college obviously funds as well. So.
Great. How will you balance increasing the tree cover with the large areas of meadow? Do you limit the density of the tree cover?
We're not looking to limit the density of tree cover. What we're looking to do is actually plant the ones that will grow within this area. So when we say meadows, it may not be we're actually going to necessarily plant things that will just grow in open meadow land. So we will have things that will need that sort of area, which will be on the outskirts of the sort of tree planting area. But in the middle, we'll be looking at more woodland plants like the foxgloves and things like this that will go in there. So we're actually being very careful on what we're planting, and we're planting what's appropriate to the area rather than just the sort of term of meadow. It's looking at sort of woodland mix, wet mix, dry mix. So we're having to look at all different areas across the site to make sure that we're planting correctly.
Question, what herbicides do you use on the sports field?
Well, basically what we're doing is because we want to keep it to a really good standard. It's the only area we actually do any spraying. So we just spray a selective weed killer that will take out the broadleaf weeds on there. So your dandelions or your daisies, things like that. I can't remember off the top of my head because we have it contracted out, and we try and look for ones that are the most, they don't really get particularly friendly chemicals, but we're basically looking just to limit it as much as possible to sort of every 2 to 3 years, just to keep on top. But it's something that's, the only other alternative would be to hand weed it, and to hand weed a cricket pitch, football and rugby, I'd probably lose everyone.
Yeah, must be quite the challenge. Yeah. To the a couple of questions about our composting. Yeah. Do you add any accelerant to the compost heaps?
No, we don't. I mean, I think the thing is that a lot of times people find that compost doesn't go through as quickly, and they struggle at home, and mostly that's due to the size of compost bins, because you don't get the heat, because you always get around the edges where it's cooler. So you end up having to turn them. Because our compost bins are so huge, they really heat up quickly. And then we obviously have a machine over there, a little digger, that we can then turn it over to mix it through. But I mean, you can see it on the cold days, the steam pouring off there, it looks like it's almost on fire. And then we're sort of saying about, do we keep some of the compost for longer, for insects and wildlife? And the truth is, we can't get through it always every year. So sometimes we leave some in there. It's not being specifically left for them, but we don't always get through it all. So it does sort of get left a bit longer in the compost area.
I'm sure this is going to be something of interest to a lot of gardeners out there. Is there a natural and effective way of controlling slugs and snails in the vegetable plot?
Well, I mean, there's the going out and picking them up at night. I think for us, it's always about increasing that biodiversity, because if you get the right things growing, you'll encourage things like hedgehogs that will come in, they will eat it. If you encourage thrushes and things like this, so if you can get all the right sort of balanced ecosystem going, they'll start to sort of look after themselves. Obviously, a veg plot is a very artificial area, so you're never going to get it perfect like this. So you can look at trying to put some of the barriers around there. I mean, I have used sort of beer traps. People tell me it's a waste of beer, but it does actually work. Basically, it's a steep-sided thing that they drop in and drown happy. Other people try with things like little copper rings around them. But I mean, for us, I think it's just making sure that you're trying to be clean as well on that. I mean, I never advocate being totally hygienic and clean on everything that you do, of taking all the dead leaves, but actually if you do that in a vegetable plot, you tend to then lose their hiding spaces, or again, things like the old traditional grapefruit upside down and go and have a look in the morning.
What else we got? And again, I think something pertinent to domestic gardens too. Do you have any problems with invasive species, for example, Japanese knotweed?
Luckily, we don't have any of that. I mean, that's one thing we wouldn't want, because obviously you would have to unfortunately treat that with chemicals, because it's something that's a sort of notifiable, and you'd have to have a specialist company come in and do it. We do have problems with ground elder and bindweed on site, but that basically we've just managed that by constantly digging at it, because by doing that, if you do it regularly enough, it weakens it, it tires it out, and slowly you get rid of it, but it's not a quick fix.
It's people and hard work, I guess.
Yes.
Is the overall idea here at the college to enhance indigenous species and reduce exotic or non-native species?
No, not really. I mean, I think the thing is we need to actually sort of embrace both sides of it, because what we see as natives now, with climate change and various things going on, they won't survive and they won't thrive. So we need to actually look to doing a bit of both. So we want to encourage the natives, but we also want to have some exotics, and we want to be a college and a garden that people like. We don't want to be just a sort of pure wildlife area.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting that balance.
Yeah.
Do you do anything to control mistletoe, which seems to be increasing in some of the trees?
No, we haven't done on that. I mean, it's a hemiparasite. It's there. It's taking some of the nutrients and water, but it has green leaves, so it does photosynthesize. So it's making some of its own nutrients. At the moment, yes, we've seen some trees, like in our apple trees in the orchard, where you can't actually see the tree, and all it would do it wouldn't grow much. The tree wouldn't produce apples, but actually they were fairly self-sufficient together. So, I mean, at the moment, it's not caused us enough problems, but if it gets worse, I mean, we always pick some at Christmas and give it away, but beyond that, at the moment, we're letting it go. And if it gets too much, we'll then have to go in and just trim it out a bit when we have some of the tree work done.
Yeah, we talked just about a lot of the work here being basically people power and just keeping attacking things. Can you tell the viewers how many gardeners are working here at the college?
We have a mixture of people that are part-time, full-time, and apprentices, but essentially there are 9 of us here, but it is a mix of various time frames for each of them. So, you know, we could always do with more.
I don't know if you get much opposition to this, but how do you deal with it if people are opposed? They prefer neat gardens rather than this more sort of wilding approach.
Essentially, we have both. I mean, you can go into the Shampoo garden, and that is neat and all manicured. We have the herbaceous border out there. We have a winter border in the master's garden. So these areas are manicured. Yeah. They're also sitting alongside, because of our scale, the wild areas around the outside. So, and again, although we let the grass grow underneath the trees, which is good for the wildlife, because you have the lawn around it, which is neat, it doesn't stand out as being untidy. It just sort of looks quite natural. So I think you just got to be careful how you manage things to make them sit alongside each other, and there's sort of space for both.
Yeah, I'm aware we're coming right up to the end of our time slot, so we've still got more questions to answer, but let's go to our final one, which is coming from a student who said, I'm not sure I'd have much time to grow tomatoes, etc. Is interest spread fairly evenly across the different subjects, or are some groups of students more interested than others?
I don't know what subjects the students are studying they're interested in, but we have the vegetable garden, and tends to be more the MCR. We do have some of the JCR there. The problem for the JCR is that they're not always here when all the sort of harvest is ready, so they go off for the summer, whereas the MCR, particularly the ones that live on site in the flats at the top of the college, they want it because they have their own kitchens and little self-contained areas, so they can actually grow their own food and veg and eat it. So yeah, I'm not sure the subjects, but I know there's definitely getting more and more interest because we're increasing numbers of areas for them, for their beds. So it's definitely positive.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thanks very much. And thanks for everyone for sending in questions.